Accessibility ain't just for those with disabilities. Makes the world better for everyone, online as well as in person. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the blind blogger Maxwell Ivy, and this is the Accessibility Advantage, where I am advocating for more inclusion of and accessibility for people with disabilities by emphasizing communication and collaboration instead of compliance and shame. You can find me at theaccessibilityadvantage.com or send me an email to maxwell at theaccessibilityadvantage.com. And if your organization is ready to improve accessibility on your digital platform and leverage the disability community, then please do reach out to me and I will do my best to help you with that. So today I think an unusual guest for me, but I feel like he's going to bring a lot to the conversation about accessibility, especially building it in from the beginning. So his name is Chad Bouton, and he is a accessibility consultant, educator, and advocate who sits at the intersection of disability, video gaming, and community design. His living with the challenges of retinitis pigmentosa, which is a degenerative eye disease, means that he brings a lot of invaluable lived experience to every project he's involved in. He's also the host of Unsighted Radio, a podcast that emphasizes disability, accessibility, gaming, and culture. And through his Unsighted Foundation, he travels the country doing in person demonstrations and workshops to help people understand how the blind and visually impaired interact with video games and other media. You can check him out at unsighted.com, which is UNSYTED. Chad, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and welcome to the Accessibility Advantage.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to be here and I'm so excited to sit down and talk with you today. So thank you for allowing me to come on to your podcast and talk with you.
Well, I appreciate it so much. It's always an honor. And if I ever get to the point where it ain't, then I'll quit. So, I would love for you to start with your vision loss because it goes like gaming, vision loss, gaming, and I think that will set up our conversation. But there's also some stuff in there about resilience and perseverance that my audience that isn't necessarily here for accessibility can definitely benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you mentioned with the bio, I am living with retinitis pigmentosa. I was diagnosed with the condition when I was 11 years old. I have autosomal recessive RP, so it's very slow. It's not anything that happens like within a day or month. It can be years and years until like you see a lot of noticeable decrease in your visual acuity. So, you know, with me, there was a period from about 11 to 21 where I was able to see completely fine. I didn't need to use a cane. I didn't have to use braille, no sort of voiceover, so no narration. I learned all of that just to be prepared because my parents like really instilled into me like, with your condition, there will be a point where unfortunately your vision is just going to be bad and you won't be able to see a lot of things and your independence and confidence might take a hit. So why not just learn this now and have the tools when you really need them. So I'm thankful for that because once I turned 21, my vision really went downhill. I got a guide dog that year because I just no longer felt safe traveling on my own and just being by myself. So for the most part, I've had kind of two like personalities or personas when it comes to my vision journey. It's like I have the side of me where I know what it's like to have normal vision, like 20/20, 20/40, be able to do what I want when I want, make my own decisions. And then there's that side of me where I know where it's like to really have no kind of choice, where I'm relying on other people, where, I might want to do something, but I have to think of all the logistics before I can just really go out and do something that I want to do. And that's the same with gaming. I've had time where I played games with no accessibility, completely fine, could play by myself. And then, of course, eventually got to a point where I have to use accessibility settings in order to even just start a game. So it's a very interesting point of view. It's obviously my lived experience, and obviously everybody else's lived experience is very unique, but it's kind of interesting to kind of have that duality of, I know what it's like to not be disabled, start losing my vision, and then to lose most of my usable vision. I can still kind of see, but it's nothing functioning.
Right. Well, me personally, I have no functional vision left. I find that's easier to explain to people than light
Hmm.
perception. So I'm kind of
Hmm.
glad that you used the term functional. And my retinitis pigmentosa was caused by Bartle-Beetle syndrome, but it was
Hmm.
misdiagnosed until very recently. So when you were getting diagnosed but still had perfect vision, I was already using a white cane and learning Braille.
Right, right. Early on, because my dad was in the Air Force, so we moved around a lot. I was originally diagnosed with Leber's congenital amaurosis. They thought I might have LCA, but obviously that wasn't true because it ended up being that I had retinitis pigmentosa. So they always kind of had an idea of there's something going on with your vision. We just don't quite understand what it is. And then eventually at 11, that's when it had progressed to a point where they could truly identify it just by looking at the back of the retina.
Yeah, the ability to test for so much of this nowadays is making it a lot easier on the individuals losing vision or contemplating the fact that they may, and their family members, than
Mm-hmm.
20, 30, 40 years ago when it was a lot of guesswork and intuition on the part of your doctors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about how you go from being a gamer who's losing or lost most of his vision to becoming a accessibility expert focusing on gaming who's actually employed by gaming companies to make sure their games are accessible. How does that happen?
Well, it's definitely not something I thought I would ever do, and it's not something I planned to do. After graduating from high school in 2011, I went to college and got a history degree. I wanted to be a teacher for middle school children, and that was the original goal when I graduated in 2017. Uh, I started to look at different districts, but at the time where I was living, there was a lot of budget cuts. So my mother, who was in the education industry for like several years, like 20 plus years, she kind of said, right now might be very unstable, and you might get overlooked, or they might just not want to hire you because of your disability, which was kind of depressing, obviously. But around that time, I was really just trying to look for anything that could get me employment because due to discrimination in my hometown, I had never worked a single job until my mid 20s. Until I finally got hired by Southeastern. So I was just looking for anything and everything. And eventually I was fortunate enough to get hired by, it's now called Dogs Incorporated, but it was called Southeastern Guide Dogs. And it's the organization that I received my guide dog Andros, who is now retired. But I was fortunate enough to work for them from 2018 to 2021 as a philanthropist. And that's probably where I would have stayed if not for the pandemic. Obviously, everybody's life got affected by the pandemic. Things just changed dramatically for a lot of people. And for me, as a philanthropist working in public events, I was just one of those casualties. They had to make a decision for the betterment of the company. So I got furloughed, and then eventually my position was terminated. And of course, I was sad because I loved working for the guide dog school. It was an awesome opportunity to give back and have an impact on my community. So after losing the job, I'm just floating around looking for anything to pay my bills. End up getting hired as a janitor at a employment office. That was good, helped me pay my bills, but was really still looking for something to kind of give me that self fulfillment. And fortunately, during the time, I was taking the chance to get back into my hobbies. Of course, gaming is that big hobby of mine that I've always loved, and was just texting my sister one day, and she asked me like, "Hey, why do you still love to play games, even though you can fairly almost see? There's not a lot that you can see in order to navigate and control these games." And it was a good question because it made me think, why do I still play games with all of the accessibility barriers that still exist? And she said, well, you should really think about that and see if there are any publications out there that will let you share your story and your perspective as being a blind gamer. And so I worked with her to create this big formal email, super formal, drafted it, sent it out, and I sent it to 30 different publications. I got 29 no's, or not at this time, or that's not our type of coverage. And thankfully, there was one publication out there that said, yes, would you like to write something for us? And that was Nintendo Life out of the United Kingdom. They were my golden ticket, basically. They allowed me to use my lived experience as a disabled gamer to write about Nintendo products and their games, the state of their accessibility. This was around 2022. It's come a long way since then, but yeah, I published that, and it really just kind of snowballed all from there. I eventually had someone from the RNIB, which is the Royal National Institute of Blind People out of the United Kingdom, reached out to me. They have a radio show they do, and one of their content creators read my article, asked me to come on to talk about accessibility, the state of accessibility in gaming. And I went on, talked about it, and they kept allowing me to come back on and record more content. And that really encouraged me to, really start looking at whether there might be something here, whether I might have found something, just stumbled upon the holy grail for me. In the career that as a child I dreamt of, like, oh my God, it would be amazing if I could be in the game industry. But to make a long story short, after talking with them a little bit more, the RNIB, they encouraged me to start my podcast, the Unsighted Radio, and I launched that back in 2023. And it's through reaching out to people to come on my show that I found a couple of individuals, Ian Hamilton, Sightless Combat, Anna Wastemeyer, and they helped me, kind of get my foot in the door when it comes to accessibility and working in the game industry. So it was a very strange path, but God, is it one that I love that I took.
Yeah, and that's sometimes it's deciding to put yourself out there and ask for something. Other times it's accepting those things when they come to you. I can't listen to your story and not be thankful for the people at Audio Eye reaching out to me after a thank you note on LinkedIn and convincing me that I was a storyteller that could help make the concepts of accessibility for websites come alive in the minds of their readers in a way people they had on contract already didn't or couldn't. So, but I really wanted you to tell that because it is a great example of just continuing and getting turned down 30 times. There are authors and podcasters and other creatives who can definitely resonate with that. So.
Yeah.
You became you started the podcast after doing the radio shows. And so did the podcast lead to you getting your first job working directly for a gaming company? Is that how it happened?
Yeah, in a way it did. Because obviously reaching out to people like Ian Hamilton, who is an absolute just legend in the game industry. He's been working, 20 plus years when it comes to accessibility. So he helped me get my first ever working job. I can't really talk about it, unfortunately, but the first thing I ever worked on, he helped me, just by reaching out to him and emailing him, hey, can you go on the podcast? But also do you have any advice for someone who is looking at maybe using their lived experience as a disabled gamer who would want to, leverage that lived experience into an actual career? And he was very kind to help me reach out to people. He encouraged me to reach out to Anna Weismeyer, and she works at Xbox and is a part of their accessibility team. And they have an amazing program there for their accessibility research team, where just gamers of all walks of life with disability and or chronic illnesses, they're allowed to basically apply. And then if there are any opportunities that come available, then they might have the opportunity to work with a studio or developer. So there's a lot of great programs out there available to the public where you can kind of first get started. But yes, in a way, the podcast did help me start my career because it allowed me to network with some people who I wanted as guests, but in the end, I got something even more valuable out of them.
Right. I was recently reading a LinkedIn post, and I wish I could remember who wrote it. He was talking about doing what you've done and what I'm just starting to do with my podcast. He said, nobody wants to be sold to, but just about everybody wants to share their business or their story.
Mm-hmm.
So asking somebody to come on a podcast can be a great way to get your foot in the door.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the closest friends I have in my life now, I met through the podcast. Obviously, we're colleagues as well because we all work in accessibility in the industry of making things more accessible. But outside of work, we've become just lifelong friends, and it's just amazing to be able to build a community where I love them and they love me back, and we support each other. It's a great feeling to have.
Yeah, same here. Lots of great close friends and people that have been part of my journey through my blog and social media before podcasting, with podcasting as well. So we've got to the point of you are working in this industry in accessibility, doing what you love to do, but probably never thought you'd get to do as a living. Let's talk about some of the accessibility issues, because one of the things I like about your podcast is you mentioned disability, accessibility, gaming, and culture. Because I'm not a gamer. I haven't played video games since I was in my early teens, and back then it was Atari. And so I'm not a gamer, but I understand the importance of games, whether they're board games, schoolyard games, or video games, in socialization and becoming part of your community. So is that part of your message with Unsighted?
Absolutely. I mean, gaming is more than a hobby, and a lot of people obviously would tell you, well, it's something you can do without. But depending on the individual, that's not true at all. Like for me, gaming is I have to have it, and it's not just because I enjoy playing games. It's because of what I get out of games. For me, the big thing that I loved about gaming as I was going through the process of losing the majority of my functioning vision was the escapism. So just being able to turn on a game and for an hour or 30 minutes, however long, I couldn't just escape. I didn't have to be Chad. I didn't have to be a blind person, because at this point in my life, I did not want to accept my disability identity. I didn't think being blind was a good thing, or anything good could come from being blind. So I just wanted to escape from that, and games allowed me to do that. They gave me control, which was something I had nothing in the real world of. I couldn't control anything about my disability. So it just allowed me to kind of just numb my mind and just laugh, have fun, and experience, these high fantasy, sometimes sci-fi realistic worlds, and just forget about things and just really just immerse myself in these worlds and these characters. And I mean, there have been lessons that you can learn from games. I do think, games can teach you about, sensitive topics like, racism, sexism, religious oppression. I mean, there are games of all genres and of all, topics and themes, and you can, start to discover some things that you never thought about before, or start wanting to know more about certain conversations. And So yeah, for me, gaming is huge, and I know for other people it's the same thing. You know, it helps a lot with their mental health and their well-being. Has an impact on their physical well-being as well. And of course, you know, I can't say enough about how many people you can meet through gaming, that they become more than just an online friend. They become a part of your life. And while we still joke and say you can't meet real friends online, I would highly contest that.
Yeah, that's been one of the big changes in gaming that I did not get to experience because when I could still play, if you wanted to play with other people, they had to come over to your house.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So
I had a little bit of that myself. You know, I was born in the mid '90s, so I grew up on Nintendo, when it still was. If you wanted to do co-op, it was, hey, come over to my house and bring your controller. We're gonna play Mario Kart together. You know, nowadays it's like, hey, buddy who lives in Thailand, be online at this time and we'll play around a Call of Duty. You know, it's a lot different nowadays.
right. So what would you say the status is of accessibility in gaming and in entertainment media?
I think we're at a really great place. Obviously, there's so much work that still needs to be done, and the work will never stop. Just advocating for proper representation and inclusion, that is something that, will always need to be done. But in terms of where we've come and where we're going, we're at a really good place. Obviously, when you really think about it, I mean, obviously, accessibility in gaming has been happening for a very long time. But in terms of like the mainstream, focus on it, a lot of people point at 2021 being the year when kind of the door was kicked open and just unable to ever be closed again because of The Last of Us Part 2, which was published by Naughty Dog. It was one of the first AAA games to be made playable for pretty much almost every accessibility, but specifically for totally blind. It was one of the first games to be made completely playable for totally blind, and that was a really big, landmark moment for accessibility. And we've had so many games since then that have come out that are accessible. God of War, Forza, Spider-Man 2, Doom: The Dark Ages, Assassin's Creed. I mean, the list goes on and on. FIFA. I mean, there's so many games with so many different genres that are being made accessible, and it might not always be that the games that are being worked on might be for our community. For me, not every game is being made blind accessible, but they are still being made accessible, which I think is an important thing to understand, because any progress should be celebrated, no matter if it's for your community or not. You should always celebrate when a developer in the studio works on accessibility, because that means progress is being made.
I couldn't agree with you more on that, especially considering how challenging it is to build in accessibility for the wide varieties of disabilities and user experience levels within those disabilities.
Yeah, yeah, and you're not always going to get it right. You know, Maybe if it's your first, second, third time, there might be something you overlook. But especially for those who are just starting the accessibility journey, they're not going to get everything right when they publish that first game. There are going to be growing pains that they have to go through, and that can only be experienced by, one, learning about these communities, what their barriers are when it comes to accessibility, how you as the developer can basically solve those barriers and make them a non-issue, and then see what you can do and with the available time and budget. And not every maybe not everything's going to get in the first game, but it can with the second, third, fourth, and fifth games. So obviously, um, you know, I feel it's very important that when a game studio starts their journey, that we be very receptive and welcoming, and let them know that what they're doing is a good thing, because we don't want to just be like, oh, well, your game didn't do this, this, and that, or blah, 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 XYZ wasn't done, so your game sucks. And it's like, well, we're not doing a very good job of making them feel like they did something great by making their game accessible. So lots of positive praise for any sort of accessibility, because even if a game is 50% accessible, that means that the next time they work on a game, they only have 50% left to achieve on that second game. So, gotta look at it linearly. There's always going to be progress going forward with each new step.
Right, and I'm glad we agree on that. That it is all about the progress and the sincere investment of effort, more so than a game being 100% accessible. Especially when we're talking about maybe a company that's new to creating accessibility or that's new to gaming. Period.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when they first jump into it, they have this idea of, well, people have told us we should make our game accessible for blind gamers, but we don't know what that looks like. We have examples of games that we can obviously draw from in terms of inspiration, and of course there are some um, guidelines that you can get. Xbox has a great guideline that is out and available for any developer. But again, it's the actual people who are going to be playing your game, and everybody is different. Doesn't matter if you and I both have RP, but our lived experiences are completely different, and as gamers, our needs are most likely 100% different. So again, it's also just exposing yourself to the community and really understanding the challenges of that community when it comes to gaming. Because there's no better way to understand what blind gamers need than talking to a blind gamer.
Right. So that's actually a good transition into talking about the foundation and the work you do, actually trying to show people how blind and visually impaired people experience gaming.
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously, I have my own company, Unsighted LLC, and I'm really happy to have that. At first it was just to kind of have something official. When I started the podcast, I kind of wanted that brand. I think we all want a brand of our own. But I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And it wasn't until 2023, 24, where I finally realized what I really wanted to do with my company. And that was to put on live workshops showcasing blind accessibility in games, and focusing on schools for the blind, or organizations like Division of Blind Services or Lighthouse for the Blind, and talking with their students, um, and just seeing what their understanding of accessibility in gaming is, and just asking them, like, do you know that games are accessible to you? Because it's interesting how a lot of people don't know that there are blind accessible games. And obviously the question I always get a lot when I tell people at these organizations sometimes is just like, oh really, I didn't even know that blind people like to play games. It's like, oh yeah, well, there's a lot of blind people that love to play games. But I think the thing that I love the most is helping blind players who have been gamers and of course are now blind or starting to lose their vision. They don't have to give up on it. Or the other one that I love too is for those that have been blind since birth, maybe they never realized that they could be a gamer, or they never realized that they would enjoy gaming. So by putting on these workshops and getting to be one-on-one with these students, I can maybe help someone find out about a complete field of entertainment that they never realized that they needed in their life.
Right. So, do you also do demonstrations to help the sighted folks better understand the disability?
Yeah. So, when I do a workshop, I do two parts. I do one part lecture, and then I do, of course, the big part, the second part is hands-on experience. So the lecture is basically doing the best job that I can with the time that I have to kind of run through a lot of the accessibility that's available for blind and totally blind gamers. So talking to them about navigational assistance, audio description, you know, uh, navigation, screen readers, things like auto traversal or auto targeting, changing the contrast or the opacity, the text size, all these different things that can help people on the entire spectrum of vision loss, whether they be low vision, legally blind, blind, or totally blind. There's something in almost every game nowadays for someone on the spectrum of vision loss. So just running through that, and then obviously for the sighted people, who are in the audience, they probably have never heard of things like alternative text or audio description, narration. They don't know about these things, or they've heard about it and they have a very vague understanding about it. So, kind of hammering in on what exactly it is, why it's important, and how it helps people who are losing their vision or are completely blind. And then, of course, with the hands-on, it's, allowing people to experience what I've just told them and really let them see firsthand what it feels like to have that, happen for them. So, if they want to experience navigational assistance, give them a game that really hammers in on navigational assistance or audio description or auto combat, or if they want to play a racing game where they can control the car by themselves, give them like Forza Motorsports, just really allow them to understand the power of accessibility when it comes to gaming.
I've been thinking about that when it comes to accessibility for websites and apps, which some of the same stuff is involved because they both depend a lot on media and creating media in a way that people can understand. But I've often thought that I should be looking at doing something more hands-on the next time I give talks, because it's amazing how few people really understand the navigation limitations of a adaptive tech user like us when they visit a website or a smartphone app.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the hands-on experience is crucial to them really connecting the dots on like why this thing I just told you about really works in terms of like an actual practical application. So, maybe just it's not the 100% best way to make them understand what our life is like, but blindfolding someone after you've talked to them about navigating a website, it's okay. Here you go. You're on the web page now. If you say you're on Walmart's web page, search for sodas or energy drinks and add that to your cart, or whatever you want it to be. But like, can you do this? And if you can't, then tell me where you're struggling, and maybe I can, help you understand like what exactly about the tools that are available are going to be the most assistive for you.
Yes, I think you've given me a lot to think about on that side of it, because when it comes to talking to developers and designers of websites, many of them do not understand about the way we actually find information on a website or an app screen. So
yeah, and also the great thing is if you're doing it with like an individual like company, maybe you can show them like some of the things about their website that might make it not. Again,
you're sneaky. I like that. We have to steal that. You're right. That definitely could.
It's not a bad thing to point out where there's a barrier, because how are they going to know it's a barrier if you don't help them understand why it's a barrier?
Yeah. In fact, I lost out on a speaking gig 2 years ago, and I found out that the person they selected took the organizer's website and did a walkthrough of their website and accessibility at the conference. So you're right. If you're teaching a company about accessibility, and going in that there are some issues with accessibility on their website, app, or other online platform pieces, then you are there in a way you can make a connection that could possibly lead to getting hired or being invited to have a conversation about getting hired. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, a good friend of mine who sadly no longer with us, he passed away. But Brandon Cole, a true, trailblazer of the consulting industry when it comes to accessibility in video games. He stood up during a conference in front of Naughty Dog themselves and said, "I wish I could play a game like The Last of Us, but unfortunately I can't because it's not accessible." And by just saying those words, he planted the seeds in all of Naughty Dog to go, I wonder why it's not accessible to someone who's blind. And then it led them to ask him, well, how can we make The Last of Us playable for blind people? So just by saying something like that, you never know what you can start and create. And, sometimes you just, need to put it out there like, hey, it doesn't work because of this. And maybe they'll be like, great, can you help us more? Well, you never know the power of your voice, so never be afraid to use your voice because your voice has power.
Well, you're talking to a guy who is known for saying, "If you don't ask, they can't say yes." So I've just got to go over to the dark side and ask a lot more people.
Yeah.
So before I forget, let's talk a little bit about universal design and the importance of building accessibility in as much as possible in the beginning of a development process.
Yeah, I always tell people, think of accessibility in video games like you're trying to make a blueberry muffin. How would you like to make that blueberry muffin? Would you like to, basically prepare the batter and have the blueberries in the batter, and then you put it into the muffin tins and bake it? Or would you instead like to make the batter, not put the blueberries in it, go ahead and cook the muffins, and then after the muffins are all nice and baked, you try and shove all the blueberries into that muffin? What would you prefer? Would you prefer that from the start that there were blueberries in a blueberry muffin, or after you've already baked the muffin, you then want to put the blueberries in? Most people will say they would like the blueberries in from the start. And that is the best way you can approach accessibility when it comes to gaming, is having it be from day one a focal point on your developmental cycle.
Well, that's really important. And not everybody that's in the business of developing games is part of a huge corporation.
Mm-hmm.
For like some of the sole entrepreneurs, the people that are have the smaller teams that are let's call them indie game developers, because I don't know a better way to refer to them.
Mm-hmm.
What are a couple of things you can share with people that are like the very basic baseline, really should be in every game, regardless of how much more accessible people might go beyond that?
Oh, that's a loaded question, because there's so much I could unpack there. To be honest, there depending on the country you live in, there could be actual grants that are available for people who are wanting to make video games, but focusing on making sure that they are accessible to disabled communities. So there's actual grants that you could apply for and get funding for, so that way you have a backing to help you with your game. There's a lot of like online forums. There's like the audio games database. I know several independent developers who they first started by putting just a little game they made. It was nothing major, but just something little, and they put it out there, and then that community, they got a hold of it and said, "Oh, this is so accessible because of its audio," and that's led to them being like, "Oh, so I could make a game that's playable for you." Obviously, Xbox has their own guidelines. There are several guidelines available. I just can't think of all of them on the top of my head, but it tells you like what you should look out for when developing a game. The accessibility barriers. Basically kind of like the do's and don'ts. And then I always tell people, if you're an independent developer and you're wanting to make your game accessible, reach out to just gamers online that are disabled, because a lot of us will help you. For independent developers, obviously money is tight. They are doing the best they can with limited resources. Of course, they are super talented, but there's only so much they can do with what they have available to themselves. And I always, for independents, like sole developers, I think it's okay to completely be like, hey, don't worry about paying me. You need to focus on funding this game and getting it available. So if I can help you in some way, I will. Or better yet, if I can lead you to someone, a publisher, a designer who could help you, really reach that next level, then I can do that as well. Paying it forward, is a huge thing for me. Like, if you don't have the answer to the question, then give them to people who do, because obviously there's people out there that can help. And obviously we want to share our lived experience. So if you're wanting to make a game for a disabled gamer, for a disabled community, then please contact us. All of us will want to talk to you and help you the best that we can.
Right. So it sounds like what you're saying is to start building a community of people with disabilities, and they will help you make sure that your game is accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. That's key. Of course, having an understanding of the tools like Unity, Unreal Engine. Like obviously, you're gonna have to know all the programming and the coding, because some of these people are doing it just by themselves. I mean, it's insane. Like Alex Leone, who's making Upheaval, and then Hugh Millward, who made War Sim Realms of Aslana. I mean, these are one people. They do this and they make these amazing games, and they're completely accessible for totally blind, and it's just amazing what they're able to do. But obviously they still need help, because a lot of times developers are not disabled, and sadly a lot of the systems that they use to make the games are not 100% accessible for disabled developers. We're getting better as the years go by, but we're still at a point where it's not 100% accessible for people who are disabled to go full time into developing. There are still a lot of barriers, but for the most part, those who aren't disabled in any way and are making games, they're going to need to know what to look out for, and they have no way of knowing that. They can only get that experience by talking to people who have the lived experience.
Right. Well, I'm glad you spoke to the developing side of it, and that it's not as accessible as the games are yet, but that's kind of similar to online content in general, where the front end is almost always more accessible than the back end or the tools used to build something. I recently talked to the gentleman at Mars Edit, and he was telling me that the wireframes product that most people are developing their apps with does a good job at helping you make an app accessible.
Mm-hmm.
But the frames thing itself is not all that accessible. So it sounds
Right.
similar with gaming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's getting better though. There's some progress being made, and I think again, with each new generation, we get a step closer. It's a long journey, that is for sure, and it can be very frustrating when you feel like there's no work being done. But the reality is that work is being done. It's just sometimes it's going to be a little bit longer than you would like. Doesn't mean your frustrations aren't valid, but just try and keep in mind that accessibility doesn't happen in days. It happens in months, and sometimes it happens in years.
Right. Well, I appreciate you sharing all this great information with me and my audience. So before we call it a day, could you share maybe one piece of advice for the designers and one for the many game players that are out there who are blind or visually impaired?
Can I say one thing though before I do
Sure.
that?
Sure.
You talked about resilience earlier on, and the one thing I want to leave with your audience is to not be afraid to fail, because sometimes the best things in life can come from what you believe is the worst thing ever. For me, what I thought was the worst thing ever was losing my job to the pandemic. I thought that I wanted to just work at Southeastern Guide Dogs for the rest of my life. But somehow, some way, losing my job led to me having this amazing career and being able to sit down and talk with you. So don't be afraid to fail. Sometimes it might seem really, really bad, but something amazing might just be about to happen. So I do want to say that.
Right, and one of the great things about it for me, it was no longer being a carnival owner, and then realizing I was more than a used ride broker. But is these things that turns out we weren't our last thing, they
Hmm.
still teach us valuable lessons and develop
Hmm.
important skills.
100%. Absolutely. There's so much lessons you can learn from mistakes and failure. And every time I've failed or I've, been defeated, I've learned something for the next time.
Well,
But yes,
that sounds like a
uh,
great thought for life and for also gamers, whether you're designing them or playing them. So,
yeah, absolutely. And for designers and developers, start the conversation. A lot of times when it comes to accessibility, there's always a conversation that happens before you start developing. So start those conversations early. Have it be a day one thing. Don't wait until you're 50% done with the game to start going, hey, maybe we should make this accessible. Make it accessible from day one. That's how accessibility works the best. But also, if you are limited in your resources and funds, and you just have to put a game out, put the game out. There's nothing wrong with having to go back because it's definitely a big endeavor to put out a game that you've developed and then say, I want to now make it accessible. You have to basically rework the entire game, but people do it, and obviously we'd love for it to be there from day one, but it's also impressive that you were so dedicated to making sure that more people can play your game that you took on the additional work of then making it accessible after you've already released it. So there's never a time where you can't make your game accessible. It's only you
right.
yourself, or sometimes the publisher. And the publisher, you can't really fight them at sometimes. But if you're an independent developer, you are the only hurdle. And if you need help, again, like I've said over and over, reach out. We will definitely help you. And for gamers who are disabled, I guess just you know there's a lot of websites out there that can tell you about the accessibility available in games. There's Can I Play That? There's the Game Accessibility Nexus. These are online forums and websites where they review games from a disability perspective. A lot of them have, writers who are disabled themselves, and they review things from the perspective of their disability. So a blind gamer reviewing a game with blind accessibility, or someone with cerebral palsy reviewing a game from a motor neural perspective. But there's a lot of great resources out there that can help you find the information you need to discover a game that will be perfect for you.
Well, that's good to know that we have more accessible games, more people with disabilities writing, playing, and contributing to the development of them. So I want to thank you for coming on the podcast and helping to to expand this topic because as we both agree, gaming is not just a hobby or a pastime. It's an important part of being in the society that we live in today. And when people with disabilities are excluded from things like gaming, they're excluded from a lot of the connections, a lot of the great people that they might meet otherwise. So, really glad that we
Mm-hmm.
talked about it. And again, y'all can find Chad's on his website, which is unsighted.com, UNSYTED. Definitely advise you to check out his podcast, Unsighted. And as he said, if you have questions or if you need to get some advice on where to go next with your game and accessibility, reach out to him. So,
I'm on LinkedIn, Chad Bouton, Bouton. If you want to have a conversation, I would love to have a conversation.
well, thanks for reminding me to get the LinkedIn in there because because I think both of us there's more information on LinkedIn than there is on our website. So it's good that you
LinkedIn
got
has,
it in.
it's been so beneficial. Once I finally started getting on there, it's helped me grow and flourish even more. So yeah, love me some LinkedIn.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate it. And for those of y'all that have been joining us today, I appreciate that you decided to spend some time with us. I do know that you have a lot of demands on your time and a very precious
Mhm.
little amount of time to spend on things that educate, entertain, or inspire. So I'm glad that you decided to spend some of that time with us. I hope you'll join me on the next episode of the Accessibility Advantage. You can find me at theaccessibilityadvantage.com or on LinkedIn. I'm Maxwell IV, IV as in Victor EY. I am a accessibility expert with almost 20 years lived experience in the area of websites and apps. And I love sharing my knowledge and experience through writing, speaking, consulting, and podcasting. And if your organization is ready to discuss making your online presence more accessible, or you're ready to start doing the work, then please do reach out to me at the website. Until next time, take care of yourselves out there. Disabled people, we tell our friends and share to our social sites. Don't think about how hard it is. Just focus on those dollar signs. Cause accessibility ain't just for those with disabilities.
Item chooser menu. 33 items. 1. Share your referral link. And 2 more items. Group. Item chooser menu. 1. 3 items. End stream. Button. End stream. End the stream. Outro. Set not. End stream. End stream. Button. StreamYard. Studio.